My name is Tom. For most of my life, I had a normal job, normal problems, and normal plans. Then came that period people call hard. Illness, getting laid off, months without health or strength, and that humiliating silence when you send out CVs and nobody even replies. When I could finally walk without getting out of breath, I was no longer fully available. And back then, that phrase meant only one thing: you're disposable. That's why I started taking care of dogs. Owners would travel, and I'd come by, feed them, walk them, clean up, sometimes stay overnight. They paid for peace of mind. I paid my bills. And then the Stones came along, a wealthy family, a big house at the end of the street, the kind where even the mailbox looks more expensive than my car. My first job with them felt like winning, better pay than anyone else offered, always paid on time. They had 2 Akita Inus, big dogs, a Japanese breed, beautiful, heavy, proud. The male was darker, with a mask on his muzzle that made him look permanently serious. The female was lighter, with a white patch on her chest. They named them Kumo and Yuki. I worked for the Stones for over a year. They traveled often, so often that at one point, I stopped taking other clients, because I was at their place constantly anyway. I had my own guest room. I knew their house. I knew the dog's routine. I felt at home there. It was steady, safe, predictable. And in my life, predictability was medicine. As always, Mrs. Stone called.
Tom, we're leaving for a few days next week, and if you can, I'd rather you stayed overnight. So they won't be lonely.
Sure, I said. No problem. On the day they left, I arrived in the afternoon. The Stones were already in the doorway, slightly rushed, with that perfect smile that matched the perfect house.
Thank you, Tom.
Mrs. Stone said.
You know where everything is, if anything.
I'll call, I finished, because we always said that. The dogs were in the living room. Usually, when I walked in, Yuki would run up first and rub against my legs, and Kumo would come more calmly, like he was pretending he wasn't excited. This time, they came over, but not like always. They didn't rush me, didn't jump. There wasn't that joy. They just came closer and stood there. They were kind of strange. I thought, okay, they can tell their owners are leaving, or they're having a bad day. The Stones said goodbye in the doorway, the car drove off, and I was alone with the house and the dogs. I took my bag upstairs, carried it into the guest room, unpacked. When I came back down, Kumo and Yuki were sitting by the stairs, both of them, staring motionless up at the second floor, not at me, upstairs. I stood next to them, and for a second I looked up too, like an idiot, as if an explanation was going to be standing there. Silence. What is it? I muttered. Yuki didn't even twitch. Kumo only flicked an ear. I said, "Come on," and they followed me into the kitchen. Dinner was normal. Bowls, food, water. I took them for a short walk around the yard. Then I locked the house, checked the doors, turned on the alarm, like always. The first evening passed without anything I would have called paranormal. But at night I felt strange. Something woke me. I don't know what time it was. The guest room was dark, but I still had the feeling someone was standing on the other side of the door. I didn't hear scratching. I didn't hear barking. Just a quiet sound, like something rubbing against the hallway carpet. I sat up and opened the door. Kumo was standing 2 meters away. Yuki was sitting by the stairs. They were looking in my direction. "What are you doing?" I whispered. Kumo stared for a moment, then turned mechanically and went downstairs as if nothing had happened. Yuki stood up and did the same. They weren't wagging their tails. Their walk was a bit stiff. That was weird, I thought. I closed the door, went back to bed. I tried to fall asleep, telling myself they were just dogs, that they walked around at night, that it was normal. In the morning, I woke up early. Usually, Yuki would jump on me the moment I stepped out of the room. This time, she was standing at the bottom of the stairs, waiting with her head tilted. Kumo was sitting by the living room door, watching me too. I came down, stretched, said morning to them. Yuki came closer, but not all the way. She stopped to step away from me, lay down, and stared straight at my face. I asked, "What is your problem?" The dogs stood up but didn't move from where they were. In the kitchen, I was making coffee. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Kumo walking on two legs. I turned my head quickly. The dog was sitting normally on the floor. It must have been my imagination, probably from being tired. I muttered to myself, "All right, first I'll take care of you, then me." At that exact moment, Yuki, who was standing in the kitchen doorway, backed up a few steps. That unnatural, stiff walk again. I had the feeling she moved not because I raised my voice, which usually worked on her. I didn't raise it. It was just, I finished speaking, and she reacted. A coincidence, I thought, trying to rationalize everything, but it was enough to make me feel a strange unease. On the second day, when I was preparing their food, Kumo didn't go to the bowl right away. He stood there and stared at me, like he was waiting for something. I said automatically, "Go on, eat." And only then did he start. You could call it a well-trained dog, except the Stones had never trained them like that, and Kumo had never done it before. Their dogs always did whatever they wanted and ignored whatever you asked of them. That same day, on a walk, Yuki suddenly stopped by the gate and refused to go any farther. She looked toward the street, as if something was standing beyond the fence. I couldn't see anything. Silence, an empty street, a few houses. Normal day. "What is it?" I asked. Yuki didn't move. Kumo stopped too and stared in the same direction. I stood there with them for almost a minute. Then Yuki turned her head and walked on automatically, like time was up. In the evening, I called Mrs. Stone, not in panic, more out of stupid curiosity. "Hey," I started. "Quick question. Have the dogs been trained anywhere recently? Because they're reacting differently to some things."
Trained? Tom, they're as stubborn as mules. No training. Why?
I hesitated because I didn't want to sound like an idiot. I don't know. Maybe I'm imagining it.
Tom, you know them better than we do. Don't wind yourself up. Thank you.
She hung up. The third night brought something I couldn't dismiss as maybe I'm imagining it. I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling. At some point, I sat up, grabbed my phone, checked the time. It was after 2. I went downstairs for water. In the dim light, I saw Kumo and Yuki by the front door. They were sitting facing each other, motionless. I stopped on the stairs. At that exact moment, they both looked at me. I have the impression they hadn't even moved before that. For the first time, I felt a real cramp in my stomach. I went down carefully. Kumo stood up and shifted so he was between me and the front door. He didn't growl. He didn't bristle. He just stood there. Yuki stayed where she was. I took a step toward the kitchen. Kumo moved slightly, keeping the same line. My heart started pounding. I said stupidly, "Kumo, what is it?" And then something strange happened. Yuki, sitting by the door, moved her muzzle. She didn't bark. She moved her muzzle like she was trying to say a word. Her mouth formed a very unnatural shape. I stepped back. Kumo didn't move. He just stared. I went back to the guest room quickly and closed the door. I didn't sleep. After all that, I couldn't. I had to do something. Eventually, I grabbed my laptop and went downstairs. Your brain does weird things when you're exhausted and scared, but I had to do something to make this situation feel normal again. They're just dogs. I'm not going to be afraid of them. Maybe it was some strange canine illness. I typed things like, dog acting strange, dog staring without blinking, dog reacts to sentences, more sites, forums, nonsense, creepypastas. And then I found one word that kept coming up in a few places. Skinwalker. Skinwalker? I said out loud without meaning to. The dogs, who hadn't moved from their spot the entire time I went upstairs and came back down, still without moving their bodies, turned their heads toward me. Cold sweat ran down my forehead. I clicked. It was the first time I'd ever heard of something like that. A skinwalker. I read, I scrolled, I opened more links. At some point, the laptop screen went black. For a second, I thought the battery had died, but it was plugged in. Then the desktop came back. Only the desktop. No browser, no bars. Like someone had closed everything at once. And then a window popped up, like a video call. In the window was a hooded figure. I couldn't see a face. I heard a calm voice.
You have to read the list. If at least 3 points match, run immediately.
I froze at the table. I didn't even have time to say anything, because I heard a sound from the study. The printer. The Stones had a printer, but my laptop had never been connected to it. Not once. And yet, the printer started printing. I glanced toward the living room. Kumo and Yuki sat in the dark and stared at me, like they were waiting to see what I'd do. I stood up slowly, but firmly. I went to the study. I took the warm sheet of paper from the printer. At the top it said, "A list of signs that there is a skinwalker in your vicinity." I tried to stay rational, but the situation was starting to overwhelm me. With my pulse speeding up, I started to read. The list was short, no embellishments. The animal stares at you for a long time, as if trying to memorize your face. It seems the animal understands human speech far too well. It stops showing normal emotions. It doesn't get happy, afraid, or angry the way it should. It looks like it's imitating. It starts positioning itself in the house like a person, blocking passages, guarding doors, waiting in places that make strategic sense. At night, you hear footsteps or movements that don't match an animal. You feel like the animal starts copying your body movements, and when you catch it, it looks normal again. You feel like the animal has started moving unnaturally or stiffly. You constantly feel watched. I finished reading and felt like I was about to collapse. My arms and legs started to go stiff. Not because I believed in that kind of thing, or in the hacker on the laptop, only because the points were too accurate. I looked toward the living room. Kumo and Yuki were still sitting in the dark with their eyes fixed on me, silent, motionless, like they weren't breathing. I went back to the kitchen. The laptop still had the hooded figure's window open, but now the figure was completely still, like a frozen frame. No movement, no sound. I shut the laptop down with the button. The screen went dark, and immediately lit up on its own. Desktop, window, the same figure. My heart was hammering like crazy. I spoke out loud because the silence was unbearable. "All right, this is some kind of joke." There was no answer, but when I said joke, Yuki in the living room twitched her head. She registered the word. So I decided to do the only thing a normal person does when something abnormal is happening. Leave. I stood up, grabbed my keys, phone, wallet. I headed toward the front door. Kuma was still lying there. With every step I took toward the exit, he lifted himself higher, bit by bit. A cold feeling ran down my spine. "Okay," I whispered, "Okay." I went back into the living room. Kuma was closer now than before. I don't know when he moved. I didn't hear any footsteps. He was just closer. Yuki, too. She stood at an angle so she could see the kitchen and the stairs at the same time, like someone posted on watch. I took my phone and tried calling Mrs. Stone. No signal. I tried 911. The phone showed calling, but there was no dial tone. Silence, like the phone was calling nobody. I looked at the list again. If at least 3 match, run. More than 3 matched. Kuma moved slightly. He took half a step toward me, and then I heard a sound from upstairs. I fixed my eyes on the stairs. A shadow on the wall shifted, as if someone was upstairs and moved along the railing. I didn't see a figure, only the shadow. I stood up slowly, not taking my eyes off the stairs, and I made a mistake. I looked at Kumo, and he was staring straight into my eyes, and I swear there was something in that stare that didn't belong in a dog. Not anger, not hunger, not fear. It was nothingness. Suddenly, something started coming down the stairs in a crooked way. Out of the darkness emerged me, but not like in a mirror. There was definitely something wrong with that me. Eyes too big and wild, one leg longer than the other. When my clone reached the bottom, both dogs rose onto their hind legs, upright, with their forelegs hanging down at their sides. Then Kumo spoke in Mrs. Stone's distorted voice.
And if you can, I'd rather you stayed overnight, you know, so they won't be lonely. Won't be lonely.
Won't be lonely. Your